Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming to join our presentation today. My name's Amanda Green. I'm Principal Consultant at Cognisco. Cognisco is designed to create an environment for people to evidence their capability, competence and confidence of their workforce. I'm here today with Bryn Baxendale, Professor Bryn Baxendale from the NHS, and we're hoping to share how he works with our system in the NHS. As a psychologist, I work with clients all the time, and one of the things I'm often told is that we know what they should be doing, they've had the training, but they're not doing it. And I say, well, how do you know they know what they should be doing just because they've had the training? Now, training, of course, is very important, but it's not the only measure of competence. In order to make sure that people are going to do what you want them to do, you need to follow through with training, make sure, first of all, that they've understood it. Now, behaviour is very complicated. It's a very complex model. Just to give you some examples of some of our research relating to behaviour change and understanding, this is based on our own assessment model. 20% of our employees that we've assessed over many different assessments are underconfident or overconfident. 30% of people have misplaced confidence and misunderstanding in at least one topic area that we've assessed on. Only 20% of people actually achieve the optimal performance in all topic areas. And that's quite worrying, because we need to identify where those knowledge gaps are and where the misplaced confidence is in order to remediate those gaps. Some people, about 50% of people, have some knowledge gaps which are quite easily remediated through e-learning or some other form of training, but we need to identify where these people are. I don't want to spend too much time on the theory of planned behaviour, but I put this up really to show you how complex behaviour is. And so to take just learning for granted that is going to change behaviour, then that's where we're making a mistake. The integrated behaviour module does account for skills and knowledge, and so this is where we like to refer to this model more than others, because it also takes into account environmental constraints and where the environment itself needs to be conducive to people doing the right thing as well, not just the learning. FOG gave us a very simple model of behaviour change, and this one is quite nice to look at in terms of what can we do. We need to motivate people, we need to make sure they've got the ability, and we need to provide those triggers. Another model that I like to refer to again is cognitive dissonance. Now, this is that uncomfortable feeling we get when we do something that we know we shouldn't, or we don't do something we know we should. The example I'm giving you here is we all know we should wash our hands after going to the bathroom, particularly if we're in a food safety environment or a patient safety environment where washing your hands is very important. That cognitive dissonance is what we want to keep quite high to ensure people behave in the way that we want them to. People justify or reduce cognitive dissonance by justifying that actually we're busy, the patient's waiting, the customer's waiting, so therefore I don't need to wash my hands, it'll be okay. This is what we don't want. We want to make sure cognitive dissonance remains high so that people will do what you want them to do, even when you're not looking. Social pressure is one of our key strengths or our key indicators of how we will behave. So quite a lot of people will wash their hands because other people are in a queue waiting for the loo. Maybe not just because they know they should wash their hand, but because they know they're being observed by others. So peer influence is quite a useful one for us to use. This is the Cognisco multi-measure approach. This is what I'm saying. We use a platform. We provide our clients with a platform to measure in many different ways. So we assess their learning, we assess their capability, their ability, their confidence. We look at how they perform in practice through observations, and then we offer them targeted learning where it's needed through the system. One of our most powerful measures is called a situational judgement test. Now, I'm going to just talk you through very quickly the difference between a multiple choice assessment and our situational judgement. Now, at the end of learning, you often see a multiple choice type questionnaire. Now, it's got its place, but for me, it's very limited in us actually assessing application of knowledge and learned behaviour. This would probably be conducive to memory recall, if anything. You could probably pass this type of assessment by guessing or by removing the questions that you know are wrong. It's a very basic form of assessment. So we would try to increase the level of understanding by presenting a situational judgment assessment. What we want to do is test that if we place someone in a situation, will they apply their learning in a practical sense, and are they confident that they would do the right thing? So we create a scenario, we give them multiple responses, and we ask them to rate each and every response in its own right, and then we will ask them to indicate how confident they are in their answer. So you've got that multi-measure. Typically, people get results that look like this. They'll have their understanding score, their confidence level, and also an outcome category. Those outcome categories relate to how confidently knowledgeable they are. That's ideally where we would like people to be. Confidently knowledgeable in what you've assessed them on. At the other end of the scale, you get people who have misunderstanding, but they were really highly confident in their answers at the time. So these are the people who think they know it, they don't know it. And these are the sorts of people who will also influence the people who know it, but they're not so confident. So with these sorts of measures, we can help individuals and managers and trainers to focus where their learning is most needed. This is what we call our heat map, and this gives you an indication at an individual level and team level of where you might want to focus that development. So you can design interventions for the team where there's clearly a learning need for everyone, or you can ask your individuals to focus on what they need at an individual level. Now, they do that by accessing the system and accessing their own reports, and within their reports are embedded links to learning. These links to learning can be videos, they could be PDFs, they can be multiple different measures of learning, or they could just be book onto this following course. We also can present the links to learning in multiple different ways in a list, so they can access that pre and post assessment and use it as a learning tool as well. We've also designed a 360 assessment, which is very important in giving people continuous feedback on their own performance. So if I got feedback from my manager, my peers, my direct reports, that gives me an overview of how others perceive my performance as well. So it's another measure to indicate competence. And we can provide reports at team level, department level as well, which is very interesting. This is all presented through dashboards, where as an end user I can log in, or as a manager I can log in. You get various dashboards giving you your due assessments, your due learning, also events that could also link to simulated training, as Bryn will talk you through that in a second. And here's the dashboards where you can access your reports. But I'm going to not spend any more time on this, because I do think it's probably more powerful that I hand over to Professor Bryn Baxendale, because he can talk you through how he uses this system in process to do what he needs to do.
Brilliant. Thanks, Amanda. Welcome, everyone. Lovely to meet you. Quick sense check. Anyone here work in the NHS? Brilliant. Well done, thank you. Right, so the next 15 minutes or so is going to be talking through about how we see this sort of platform really helping us enhance how we develop people with the skills to improve care, and actually to understand when some of their capabilities may be challenged by some of the more complex or stressful situations in which they find themselves working, because quite honestly that is what we find happens in the real life, in the real world. So let's take you to the real world. This is where I work. I'm an anaesthetist. I'm a lovely person. I put you to sleep. I will wake you up at the end, honestly, and I look after you during that time. And actually, if you're lucky, you might not even remember me. Isn't that funny? There we are. So I'm an anaesthetist. I work in Nottingham University Hospital, split across 2 sites, large acute teaching hospital campus, around about 15,000 staff. working across those sites, 90 wards, 2,000 beds, working to serve a population of around about 3 million people, 24 different surgical specialties that I start to engage with. Some of those 130, 140,000 procedures a year. And all of the time we're endeavouring to be as safe as possible. And some of that work is complex and difficult and challenging. And we do our best to develop the people to be able to do that work safely for you. This is why I'm interested in it in particular, because I spend some of my time on an educational platform looking at the use of simulation to enhance performance of people in practice and to understand and to help them understand when that performance may be a little bit more challenging and to try and help them become a little bit more hazard aware about when that could be very difficult. So we use simulation as part of our toolkit, if you like, and actually this presentation really starts to describe where some of the tools that Cognisco are offering around situational judgement responses and that platform really helps us enhance how we apply a limited resource to people in the most effective way. So, what does safety look like in healthcare? This is an interesting slide. So healthcare is trying to become a high reliability industry. Very, very safe, very, very safe. And actually some industries do that. Aviation. So aviation is an example. They follow the rules almost all of the time. They have rule books, standard operating procedures, guidelines. It's quite comforting. I like that when I get on an aeroplane. I know that if I'm on an aeroplane and one person is missing, we probably sit on the tarmac and wait. If the NHS had an airline, it probably wouldn't be like that. We'd probably already have set off. The pilot may or may not be on board, and they might change halfway through the day. And some of the patients, the customers, will be getting on and off, and then someone will come up saying, well, I read about this on Google, I think we should go this route. Well, hang on, no, we're going that route. It doesn't work like that. So healthcare is a funny business, isn't it? Healthcare is a little bit more like the middle, firefighting, where you know what the work has got to be, but you've got to be adaptable. You've got to work to deal with different constraints, different challenges. Patients don't come in. You don't come in with a label on your head saying this is what's wrong with me. Follow the manual, the Haynes manual of healthcare, and you'll be all right. We have to work it out, make judgments. Sometimes that doesn't quite go so well. So actually we have to be adaptable. We train people to be adaptable. Being adaptable isn't always easy if you then want people to follow a policy or a set of rules, because they don't always apply. Occasionally we work over on the far right, really, really dangerous place to work, deep sea trawler. Actually, their marker of success is coming back alive with some fish to sell. They have to innovate, they have to adapt to whatever the circumstances are. I don't think many deep sea trawler boats go out with a rule book on and some SOPs to say, actually, well, we're getting some rough weather, let's just have a little look through the rule book, see what we're meant to do. Actually, no, they have to just deal with it, so they innovate. Now, sometimes healthcare has to innovate. We have to deal with really difficult circumstances which are quite unique, and actually, so we need that skill set. Now, the problem we have is that if you work with somebody that likes living at that end, so they wear their underpants outside their trousers generally, it's the world of heroes. If you then ask them to come and work at this end and follow the rule book, that doesn't go so well. They don't like that. And vice versa. If you like living at this end, following the rules, but you have to work at that end sometimes, that makes it really challenging for you. So how do we translate and develop this ability amongst people and work in teams to make sure that we can look after each other? Really interesting, isn't it? So quality in healthcare, what does that really mean? Well, actually, it's multifaceted. Yes, we're talking about patient safety today. It's also about clinical outcomes and effectiveness of care. You'll be very glad to know that. It's about running the business as efficiently and productively as possible. And, surprise, surprise, it's even about looking after the staff who do the work. And sometimes we lose sight of that. So staff well-being is becoming quite an important topic in terms of recruitment and retention. If you speak to staff, they are very much centred around looking after patients. So they will look after you, they get that, so they like talking to you, they like looking after you, they get the patient safety bit, that's their language, they want to do their best for you, me. They want to have you to have the most successful care, the best outcomes that you can get. Sometimes they think about well-being, but actually interesting, clinical staff, healthcare staff are quite self-critical. So sometimes we don't think about that quite enough, but we do. If you're leading and running the service, of course, you probably have this piece around productivity and efficiency slightly higher up your agenda. And actually, so you have to deal with that, as well as all of the other bits. But actually, staff don't necessarily come to work to try and save money. They come to work to look after patients and to have the best day they can doing that, working with people that have got a similar set of values. So actually, we've looked at, well, how do we engage people in that? Here's a traditional model of actually how we develop outcomes, measure them, review them, and turn them into new policies, new guidelines, new ways of working for the teams that are delivering care. You will notice that actually, by and large, the teams are not involved in that loop. So they get told, actually, this is the work we're doing next week or for the next 3 months, and actually these are the rules, these are the policies we have designed for you from my office to let you do that work. Oh, really? That's interesting. That's very good. Unfortunately, that policy doesn't quite work for us. So actually, we'll do some workarounds. Thank you very much. Actually, well, that's fine until it goes wrong. And then they say, well, why didn't you follow the policy? So we have to change that model a little bit. And a big piece is about how do you engage staff in having a voice to do that work. We've started looking at this in Nottingham through NUH Teams, which is basically positioned as a team training program. It's an evidence-based team training program using a team steps model, which is from the States. Loads of evidence about specific skills and behaviours that you want to see teams use in practice. And this comes from many different industries. This is not just healthcare. This is evidence built up in all sorts of areas of practice. And the 4 pillars of this program are around effective leadership and what that means, but leadership distributed through the team, not positioned in one person. Situation monitoring, i.e. actually having shared mental models at any time, such that a team working together who may not have met each other before, or they may be working together very regularly, at least have got a shared picture about the work that they're doing and what they're anticipating to come next. Something about mutual support. Not quite actually, oh, you're lovely, and I like your hair stuff. Actually, more about actually dealing with conflict, dealing with different perceptions about what we should do next, the judgments, the decisions, and actually being able to have a safe conversation about that. Not always easy in what is actually an area of the world which does have some authority gradients. You'll be surprised to learn, and actually having some effective communication tools. Now, actually, the trouble is this is very simple when you take people through this program. They get it, but sometimes putting it into practice can be a bit trickier. So we have to work on that, about how do we do that. So we've actually got a program whereby actually, well, we're doing the engagement piece, we're illustrating, raising awareness, teaching people about what these skill sets, what the tools and techniques are, how they can apply it. We're then now going in with the aid of SJRs and other facets of actually how we look at team performance, taking that to the teams and actually saying, okay, now we're going to support you putting it into practice. Now we're going to make you a little bit more aware about when some of those tools and techniques might be difficult to apply, and actually their skills. So we have to rehearse and practice them. It's like riding a bike. It just suddenly, you just don't get it because it arrives at Christmas. Actually, you've got to get it right. And actually that, the bottom, at the end, that's what we're trying to do, system change. System change. So this is interesting, isn't it? We position a team training program to staff that centres around patient safety. The hidden agenda, or the bottom line, is about system change and improvement. That isn't what would excite them to start with. So actually that's what we're positioning here, and actually how does it fit? So you will see here, we've put this the fabric of this program to help take some of the data, the analysis that's going on around performance, translate it into our educational program, and actually translate it into relevant contextual information for the teams doing the work that they do. So we're not giving them a generic program, they've got some generic skill sets, but actually if I sit in front of a cardiac surgical team, they're not necessarily going to be worried about the same sort of things in performance as a team that's working in an outpatient clinic. So it's got to be contextualized. So actually the data that they look at, their performance dashboard, is designed by them. Actually it's around a few things, not everything, a few things that actually mean stuff to them, that helps them identify a couple of things that they want to change about their practice. So they identify, they own this issue, we just give them the toolbox and then develop and enhance the skill set so they let them do it. The problem is a lot of those measures are lag measures. They tell us how we did last month or 3 months ago. We want to develop some stuff that tells you how might you be best positioned to predict your performance in the next 3 months or the next time you see that case. So that's where this comes in. We've got different measures. We have a team climate tool, actually, that gives people, okay, well, this is what it's like working in this team. Actually, you'll see here The dip is about actually how this team deals with conflict once it's become personalised. Well, there's a funny thing, isn't it? Human beings, and you know, we're British. We don't deal with conflict very well, so we let it fester. Nobody will challenge it, and then all of a sudden it will just flare up, and that's a much more difficult problem to deal with. So we have to apply the skill set to say, actually, well, how do we step in earlier about that? And that's a real issue for your team. So let's look at that. Let's take the skill set. Let's take the knowledge that you've developed, and we can demonstrate you've got the knowledge, and let's apply it to that set of circumstances. So that's what we do. The situational judgment responses are really starting to help us actually focus in on this, because actually we do need some assurance that the people have got the knowledge around some of these skill sets that they can apply. We need to understand actually which bits do they feel a little bit uncomfortable about doing, so that we can then focus in on some coaching and supervision in practice for those individuals or those teams around those particular topics. So it's really starting to give us slightly much better intelligence about how we use the limited resources we've got. You will remember the early slide, we're trying to be firefighters, deal with adaptability and stuff like that. Some of the industries that deal with that spend most of their time training. In healthcare, we don't. We spend most of our time working, and we do a little bit of training when we can. So actually we've got to focus on how do we optimise those opportunities, and how do we build the skill sets into improving our practice in daily practice. So that's what we're looking at: debriefing, simulation exercises, getting the teams better able to observe one another, put that knowledge into practice. So I'll come back one actually. Is anyone squeamish? No? Right, okay. Well, watch a little bit of video, because actually here's a team that we've took through the programme, and now we've gotten to do it. So, how would you feedback to that team? There's quite a lot going on. Quite a lot going on. Individuals in that team have all got an idea of which bit they're trying to get done. Now this is a team, this is our emergency team, and I thank them for letting us film them in this exercise and show it. But this is our emergency theatre team, who are actually very good. Very good. But we actually run through an exercise and we start to dissect some of those skill sets a little bit more carefully, and they can start to see actually, yes, you're right, actually, doing that particular communication tool, well, we didn't do it then. Why didn't we do it? We can start to debrief that and actually have quite a meaningful conversation with them, which is actually based on real world practice. And they can take that skill set into the next day they're actually working together with a clinical case. We can start to explore some of the really more challenging situations with simulation where we know they're going to be stretched. So actually we can stretch them, we can take two of the team out and put somebody else in who's not familiar with that team. We can give them a patient presenting with a particular case like this one, coming from a trauma ward, where they've got very little time to set up, and this was not the case they were expecting. This is something quite different, and all of a sudden they've got to get that shared mental model very quickly, and they've got to establish leadership very quickly. And actually, if the nominated team leader isn't in the room when that happens, then they've got to think, actually, how do they deal with that? So we can really start to explore some of the more complex issues which will influence their performance, but which actually in day-to-day practice, we aren't necessarily that skilled at in terms of doing that review day to day. So this is about building up the skills whereby they can not only develop the knowledge and skills, but they can rehearse them mentally, they can review what it was like when they tried to put it into practice. And it builds up and strengthens what we know that, about the data that we're getting from the SJR platform. The next bit for us with this will be doing simulated exercises or during a day's practice to debrief and actually build in some of that 360-degree feedback in to say, actually, okay, well, let's collect that data now to look at how we are learning as a team and developing the resilience we need as a team to be able to adapt to very different, difficult, sometimes challenging situations. Very occasionally getting the trawler boat coming in where we need to deal with that. Actually sometimes needing to do some pretty routine care and follow rules very carefully. And all of that happens on a day at work. So actually everyone isn't necessarily as comfortable about being at one end or the other. How do we deal with that in a dynamic world of team practice? And actually the platform that we have with the SJRs really helps us sort of nail down on some of the skill sets which people do need supervision or coaching in practice. So that's where we're going with it. So this is our final slide. This then helps really for me describe how we are taking what is an educational construct, a training and development construct around agreed areas of knowledge and skills and behaviours, but really developing an understanding of actually how ready are individuals in that team to put those into practice. How do we push that towards individual capability? The individual capability is often around non-technical skills. Actually, how well do they work effectively with other people? It's not about technical ability. We do that quite well. But sometimes we work with people who may not have quite as high an emotional intelligence as me, obviously. So actually they're a bit difficult to get on with, actually, funnily enough. But actually, how do we do that at a leadership and team performance level? What does that look like? What do we really want to develop? Because that is what's influencing the work that we do. That's what's influencing the care that we support and provide and the ability that we have to adapt or flex. And that is actually how we build up organisational learning and resilience that is what we all rely on. That is what we want. The health service is not a perfect playing field, in case you hadn't noticed. Actually, we're a bit short on money, we're a little bit short on people, we're quite constrained, so we have to recognise how we do this. And actually, we do a lot of this very well. But if you speak to a team at the moment, they just say, well, it's just what we do. So no, let's make it more visible through SJR platform, through 360 feedback. Let's have the opportunity to rehearse it and debrief in a day's work. And let's build up that resilience. Let's change the culture of how the work is done and how the people fit in. So that's where we're at, and developing that work with Cognisco has been really helpful for us to give it some focus and for the staff as well. So on the slide set there'll be some resources. That's me. If you're down with the kids and you've got a Twitter account, I'm on Twitter. I'm available for weddings and bar mitzvahs. And we are on the stand over the back there, Cognisco, we've got a stand. So if you want to come and talk to us about any of this, please do. You'd be very welcome. We'll be here for the afternoon. Thank you very much.